Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel, and we're here tonight with Rick. And today we're going to talk about some stuff, and we're going to kick it off in just a second here. And Rick, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. How you doing, Kyle?
Oh, and snap, dude! I just now saw the W hat. Can you talk about that? Why is that important for you to have a curly W hat right now?
Oh, we had history made in the DMV this week. The Nationals winning their first ever World Series title. Of course, it goes along with the Caps winning their first ever Stanley Cup 2 years ago. So, I got to start getting my Nationals Washington Post headline display together.
Yeah, I said that in jest because we were talking about this off camera, and the Washington Nationals really is the only team that in my lifetime that has not won a championship. And if you throw in the Mystics, that completes the whole thing, because even the Washington Bullets won in '78. So there's no team in the DC, Maryland area. Georgetown, the Terrapins, DC United, the Redskins, of course, Nationals, the Mystics, the Capitals. Well, this year, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, you count. Maryland basketball obviously won the NCAA tournament. But what about? Are you counting the Maryland football not winning national title?
You suck, dude.
You have to wait around a long time for that.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So no, that's not going to happen. So, but the teams that I really root for, I guess, have won. That's all right. You just totally blew up my whole existence now. So, so anyway, the parade happened this past weekend and looked pretty nice. So I wish I could have been there, but did you go?
No, I hate crowds and I hate people in general. So I was staying as far away from downtown DC as possible.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, cool, man. So, all right. So we kind of talked about this off camera, and we want to talk about a story that happened this week. And I'm gonna bring the article up here. I kind of had it before, and essentially what it is that there is a flag that is popular with the law enforcement community and probably with people in general who just support the police officers. And it's called the Thin Blue Line flag? Is that what it's called? Is there a name for it, Rick?
Yeah. So there's the standard thin blue line, which is just a black background with a thin blue line running across it. And that's been around forever. That saying's been around forever, and that symbol's been around forever. Well, post 9/11, that thin blue line has been incorporated into the American flag design, where the flag itself is black and white, and then you have the thin blue line running across it. So in this particular instance, yeah, we're talking about the flag symbol with the thin blue line.
Okay. And so this particular wood carving painting was given to a department or a district office, the 5th district office. Is that right?
Right. So Wednesday was National First Responders Day, and this particular gentleman and his son, the dad owns a woodworking shop in Germantown, in the area where I work, and he wanted to try and teach his son some values and instill some morals in his son. So the son wanted to create a thin blue line flag for the police and a thin red line flag for the fire department. So the father and son stopped by our Germantown district station with the police flag, and as you can see in the picture on the screen, the son is just beaming with joy, giving this flag to the officers. Yes,
he is smiling. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially what happened was there was a tweet by I'm not sure the guy, he was a reporter, I believe, from ABC.
Kevin Lewis, yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry, my screen's. Oh, you can still see it. Okay, let me go back here. All right, so yeah, so here's the actual tweet, and so he was basically saying that depending on who you ask, is this flag racist? And then from there, you were seeing a bunch of tweets coming out from various people in the media and from the Twitter sphere saying that this is something that needs to be taken down. How dare the law enforcement support this, and how dare they hang it up? And then essentially the police chief, I guess, or whoever the department head of that particular district office said that we're going to take it down. And then at that point, the governor of Maryland came up with this tweet saying, "I'm offended and disgusted that County Executive Mark Elrich has prohibited Montgomery County police officers from displaying a thin blue line American flag that was made for them by a father and his young son in honor of National First Responders Day." And so hopefully, that's a pretty good thing for a governor to come down and on the defense of the police officers.
Right. Governor Hogan has been very pro-police ever since he came into office. And, I know you're in North Carolina, and I don't know how closely you follow, local Maryland politics, but, when he ran for re-election in 2018, I mean, it was just a landslide. I think the last time I looked, he was the second most popular governor across the country. And he has the absolute undying support of all first responders in Maryland.
Wow. So you want to contrast that with the New York governor or the New York City mayor, Blasio, how the police officers don't really respect him based on his stance that he's had, especially with the upbringing that of the rallies against the officers a few years ago in New York and the riots and so forth, and how Blasio came to the defense of Antifa. And I thought that was totally inappropriate for a mayor who's supposed to be in charge of enforcement to do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, we to contrast, we got Governor Hogan, who loves the police, and we have the Montgomery County executive version of de Blasio as our county executive. And I think his actions with wanting to ban the flag from our station pretty much speaks for itself.
So do you think that there's a chance that they'll change course on this decision?
Knowing how Elrich has acted in the past, I expect this to be changed. Again, I don't know how closely you follow politics in Maryland, but back in July, he had a very political signing where he came out and said that the Montgomery County officials would not cooperate with ICE in any way, shape, or form, and that ICE officials would be banned from any county building. Well, just prior to this incident here with the flag, Elrich quietly tried to reverse that policy, where now ICE officials are allowed in the county jails to pick up, people who are illegal in this country and have detainers on them from ICE. And of course, that got blown up in media as well, that, Elrich is now having to backtrack on that policy. So he has a history of throwing his stuff out there, having to eat his own words and backtrack. So it's par for the course with him.
I don't know how you can have a state or local official come down against a federal a mandate. My wife's talking to me. Mm-hmm. A mandate which basically says that, hey, we have these people who are doing bad things, to put it in small, easy terms to understand. They're doing bad things because they broke the law, and it's a federal law, and therefore we would like cooperation with the local city government to do that. And the local city government says, no, we're not going to deal with that. That to me, I mean, I don't know how we, in the past, other administration would send the National Guard in, right? I mean, if you go back to the past and seen this sort of thing, we have the deviation between the 10th Amendment, where the states feel like it's their right, and the federal government says it's our right. And then you have that issue. That's how wars get started. That's how you had National Guard being pushed into places like Fort Sumter to enforce federal laws. And short from anything like that, I'm not sure what the government can do to really enforce that without having the backlash of what would come from the left and from everybody else saying, I can't believe they're doing this. But all they're doing is enforcing the law.
Yeah, and I think what a quick, simple answer would be for the federal government to do, because like right now, immigration detainers against illegals are considered civil immigration detainers. If they would make them criminal, then at that point they would be a criminal warrant, and we would have no choice but to enforce it. So because it's a civil issue with a detainer, there's kind of that gray area where, okay, we don't have to honor that, or we don't have to hold them. But if somehow Trump could push it through and make this a criminal issue at that point, and some would argue is like, okay, well, you're violating federal law anyway by being in this country illegally. But it's just how the process is set up right now, that these detainers are civil.
Okay. I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So if they would just make them like criminal warrants, like criminal, like arrest warrant, like, okay, you go out and you commit an armed robbery and a cop goes and gets an arrest warrant for you, that's a criminal matter. It should be the same thing here. But the way it's set up with the system right now, they're civil warrants.
I have never heard that. That's why I have you on the phone, man. On the call, because that information is something that I have not heard, and it makes perfect sense. And it's like a loophole almost for this for the city officials or the government, state, whatever, to basically tell the federal government to like you said, it's a gray area, right? So they have discretion. Sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, like think about it. If somebody goes and commits an armed robbery and they're illegal in this country to begin with, they go and commit an armed robbery. Let's say they commit it in Maryland. Maryland cop may get an arrest warrant for them for armed robbery. But let's say they flee to Virginia. Virginia picks them up. Virginia's going to call Maryland and say, "Hey, we've got your guy, and we're holding him on your armed robbery criminal warrant. We're going to go get him." It should be the same thing with the illegal immigration. If they could just make it a criminal matter instead of a civil matter, it might solve a lot of the issues.
I have 2 points here. Number one, to get back on the civil point, do you think it's civil because of the 10th Amendment, where there's separation? Do you think that's where it originated, or do you think it's something more devious behind that, or has it just been around a long time?
It's just been around for so long. I think that maybe when they started this, that they had no idea that it would ever get to this point, and nobody's ready to address it and change the laws yet. I mean, because it's such a hot button political issue that, can you imagine if Trump wanted to make this a criminal matter, all the backlash and everything that would happen? Because everybody would know then what that would mean, is that now you could actually enforce these things. So, yeah.
It'd be in court for a while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what's happening in North Carolina. I can't speak to it that much because I'm not really that involved and that up on the things here locally. Mm-hmm. But essentially what's going on is the fact that we have a governor who is also, he's not, look him up. All right. So the governor basically said of North Carolina said, look, we're not going to cooperate with ICE. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is, and I've seen this firsthand with people that I've actually know, where they're being picked up because the federal government is being locked out of the process. They're just coming in with the federal officers just coming in and grabbing people, right? Because since they won't work with the Greensboro PD or the Winston PD or the High Point PD or the Durham PD or the Charlotte PD or the Raleigh PD, whatever, because these particular areas won't cooperate, they're just coming in and grabbing people, right? They're just coming guns blazing, whatever. And because that's all they know how to do, they just grab people, and there's no middle process there. And so what's happening is they're grabbing people that they probably just getting because they're on a list. Whereas if they work with the local law enforcement, they can say, "Hey, these are the guys that are problems," because they know, because they're local on the ground. But yet they're getting people who are white collar workers who, yes, they may have a violation per se, but they haven't done anything in 10 years. Whereas the person, the gangbanger who just came across, he's doing bad things, whatever. They leave him because it's a numbers game, and they're just grabbing whomever to meet whatever requirement they need to meet. Is that something that sounds realistic? Because that's what I've been told, and I've seen people being snatched out because of that reason. I think that's the reason. Do you think that's a plausible observation?
Yeah, and that happens here as well. But I think it's just more of that. ICE is its own entity, and it does its own thing. So it's kind of like with the FBI. If the FBI is conducting an investigation in Montgomery County here in Maryland, they're going to come into our county, do their thing, and they may not even ever let us know that they're here.
Right.
Sometimes they may call us because, for optics purposes, if they're going to be serving a high-risk search warrant and kicking doors in, FBI agents aren't in uniform. And so sometimes, bad things can happen when cops aren't in uniform. So they may have us just stand by for a uniform marked police car presence so people know, okay, this is really the police. But otherwise, it's hands off for us. We're like, all right, it's the feds. You guys do whatever you're going to do. So it's kind of the same thing with ICE. ICE will come into our jurisdiction, snatch people up. And, if they say, hey, can you guys just stand by for a uniform presence? We'll stand by, but, we're not going to get involved because it's their own thing that they're doing.
Okay, so even if they did have full cooperation, they wouldn't come to you and say, okay, we got this list of names, we're going to go get them. They don't coordinate with you guys. They just ask for maybe, like you said, an optics or a safety measure to have you there as backup. Yeah,
and again, I think that could be different if it was changed from a civil to criminal because, If they had, if all this was criminal stuff, they could say, okay, we've got 20 people with criminal warrants for being in the country illegally. Here they are. Go find them if you can. And at that point, it's a criminal arrest warrant versus a civil detainer. So, I think if they want to look at changing how things are, maybe that might be the first place to start. I mean, I am by no means a immigration attorney or lawyer expert in that area, but I mean, just from layman's terms, that's where it seems like would be a good area to start is get rid of it being civil.
Wow. Okay. Well, that actually would help. That makes me feel a little bit better. It makes me feel a little bit less cynical. I mean, it does make me feel in a bad way. I feel better. I mean, but because I feel like like you said, this could be resolved if we had the right, I don't know, climate in place, right? I mean, I think an Obama could have done this pretty easily, right? Someone like Obama could have done this pretty easily because he didn't come into office with that sort of, I don't know, stigma in terms of his perception, in terms of his relationship with illegals, even though he treated them a lot worse than what Trump is doing, ironically, right? So it's all about perception and so forth, whatever. But this reminds me of a point that's kind of a little off topic a little bit, but sort of related. In Hong Kong, did you know that the Chinese government is actually really 2/3 in so the Congress in Hong Kong and China are separate entities until 2047. It was an agreement that Margaret Thatcher did back in the 80s, which basically said that they will have a 50-year reign. And so that China could be hands off it. And so Hong Kong and China are two total separate entities, but they're the same. So it's one China, two countries. It's a weird kind of thing. It's a paradigm. But within the Hong Kong government, there's three particular branches, more or less. And one branch is basically industrial and industry. And there's another branch that's basically led by China. And there's another branch that's led by the Hong Kong people in terms of voting powers. Mm-hmm. So the people who vote on it, 1/3 are voted on by the Hong Kong people. Another third is voted on Chinese people, Chinese government or people. And then the other third is done with the Hong Kong businesses. But of course, they don't want to make China mad. So they always vote for China. So China really owns 2/3 of the Hong Kong government. And the reason why this whole riot thing came up with this whole upbringing with Hong Kong and crying for freedom and all that stuff basically came because a man went over to Taiwan, which is part of China, I believe. I think that's right. And he murdered his girlfriend. So he and his girlfriend went to China or Taiwan. He murdered her, flew back to Hong Kong, okay, left her there. So there's actually photos of him, cameras of him leading with her and coming back by himself, right? Yeah. And so the whole point of this and why the whole thing blew up was because China was saying, look, we don't have jurisdiction in Hong Kong. We want jurisdiction. And so what they ended up doing was having that 2/3 majority pass a law saying we're going to have jurisdiction into Hong Kong and therefore we want extradition rights into Taiwan. And because of that, the Hong Kong people were saying, hey, that's a violation. You don't have the right to that. It's a slippery slope. If you do that, what's next, right? And so that's why this whole uprising came up. So my point is that it's almost like in a loose kind of way, it's almost like the ICE is like, Taiwan or the federal government trying to go into an area and then the people saying, we don't want your influence there. And so, but in our case, we have that right because we're all one country. But to your point, with that civic cloud, it's a very gray area. And with that Hong Kong Chinese thing, it's also a gray area. So it's a really, really interesting parallel that I just thought about.
Yeah. And the thing that I don't get, at least with ICE, is, with all the issues that come with the illegal immigration and, the burden that, illegals put on this country, I don't understand why, there's such a cry for, wanting to keep ICE out and to not, support ICE and do everything we can to get it's just such a burden and strain on this country with resources. I don't understand why, people don't back this.
Yeah, well, not sure I have my own opinions on that. I think people know that basically, but you're right. I mean, from a basic common sense notion, okay, ICE is law enforcement, but albeit being at the federal level, they're in place to make sure that our immigration policies are in place, and they have the muscle, I guess, right, to go in, like you said, kick doors down, because some of these people who are coming over illegally don't want to go, right? So what are you going to do? Use harsh language, right? So you got to use force sometimes. And so we have communities in Long Island, New York, that are being terrorized, places that you wouldn't think should have problems with, opioids coming in, MS-13 coming in, and these big crime elements. You would think that people would want help there, knowing that their local law enforcement is overwhelmed.
Right. And I don't know how things are in North Carolina, but at least here in Maryland, when ICE comes in and does a raid and is looking for people, they're not looking for, the husband and wife, Hispanic couple that has never had any, contact with the law. They live their life. They go to work. They don't bother anybody. That's not the people ICE are looking for. ICE are looking for the people who, have come into this country illegally, broken some kind of law, have a deportation order on hand. They've ignored that, and they're staying in the country illegally, still committing crimes. So those are the people that ICE goes after.
Oh, okay.
But it seems like the way the media portrays it is ICE is just going after the 60-year-old Hispanic couple who runs a food truck on the corner, has never had any problems with the law. That's not who they're going after. They're going after people that have come in the country illegally, committed multiple crimes, have gone and had deportation orders, and maybe have been shipped out of the country and found their way back, and are still committing crimes. Those are the ones that ICE is going after, and those are the ones that we need to get out for good.
Yeah, and I think, I have to change my position there, because I was on the assumption that they were doing just the latter, because I guess I'm buying some of the ICE, that Kool-Aid too, that from the other side, saying that they are going after the grandma, grandpa, the food truck vendor who's been here for 55 years, never committed a crime. That's the narrative that people want you to think if they weren't going to come out against ICE. You don't have an argument against ICE if you're talking about going after hardcore bad guys. Otherwise, either you're going to take the position of, if you're pro ICE, then you're going to have to take a position of, I am against the bad guys. If you're anti-ICE, then you're going to have to say that you're for the criminals. That's why you have to pretty much say, well, ICE has to be bad. You have to denigrate them, and devalue their worth by saying that they're doing things that are immoral, like you just said. Deporting the 4-year-old kid, from his parents, or separating families, that sort of thing. So you get a lot of that kind of stuff because you want to make them the enemy. That way you can justify the removal of them. Right. So, wow. Okay. Well, that's a good discussion. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I'm sure people who are listening to this is new information. So, I mean, for me, I'm just more and more, convinced now of my position on ICE, and that they're absolutely a vital force in this country to make us safer, and essentially, and to enforce our laws, because I don't know how else we can do it. Border control can only do so much.
Yeah, and you hear people like AOC or whatever talk about wanting to abolish ICE. Is like, I can't even imagine the chaos this country would fall into if they were ever to abolish ICE.
Now, their formation came out, was that after 9/11? Prior to that.
So beforehand they were called, I think it was just Custom and Border Patrol, is what they were called, and then they changed it to Immigration and Custom Enforcement.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So it was just. I think when they, after 9/11, and when Department of Homeland Security was created and all that, they just kind of restructured, reorganized things, and that was one of the things they went from, the CBP to ICE.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. That's awesome. Awesome discussion. Cool. So, anything else you got going on right now?
No, I mean, this whole thing with the thin blue line flag, I mean, it has been crazy. We put it up on Wednesday. We got the photo. We put it on social media on Wednesday. It was just an innocuous photo of this guy and his son presenting this wooden flag. And, the department has two social media. We have Facebook presence and a Twitter presence. On Facebook, it was all positive comments. On Twitter, it's where all the SJWs came out and just hammered us. And it was just a small minority that raised enough stink that caused this thing with Elrich. And the problem is that they're getting the thin blue line flag confused with, for whatever reason, they keep calling it a Blue Lives Matter flag, and that's not what it is.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's not what it is. So,
so what is, so what is the So okay, so that's a really good point, because I conflated those two as well, and I would have said the same thing. So what's the difference?
So here's how all this happened. So the thin blue line it came from
a movie, right?
Well, yeah. So, but it initially came from I can't remember what war it was, but England was at war with Russia back in the late 1800s, and they had a thing called the Thin Red Line, where the English were fighting the Russians, and so that's where it kind of started, like the thin line or whatever, because they were fighting the Russians, and they were the redcoats wearing red uniforms, so they coined the phrase Thin Red Line.
Okay.
So in the 1950s, there was a TV show or movie that came out, and one of the actors, was portraying a cop, and he says something along the lines of, we represent the thin blue line that separates, order from chaos.
Yep.
So that's kind of where it became adopted into police culture. It came from a movie or TV show. I don't remember which one back in the 50s.
That's what I thought too. Okay.
Yeah. So then, since that came out in the 50s or 60s, you had the black field with just the thin blue line across it as the symbol.
Let me bring it up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, and cops across the country have adopted that. But then post 9/11 is when the flag version came along. They took the color out of the flag, make it black and white flag, and put the thin blue line again to symbolize police being the only thing that stands between order and chaos. So that flag, thin blue line flag, has been around since 9/11, post 9/11.
Okay.
So what happened is, after the incident in Charlottesville a couple years ago, the protesters there and the neo-Nazis and all that were waving that flag at their protest. So because the neo-Nazis were waving that flag, it became a symbol of hate. So,
Gotcha.
The Blue Lives Matter movement was born post Black Lives Matter movement to counteract all the violence against police and all the backlash against police, to stand up against that. So when you factor, the Charlottesville incident, with the people waving that flag and people believing that Blue Lives Matter was formed as a direct counter protest to Black Lives Matter, that's where that whole thing started. But it's two completely separate things. And my argument is, like, okay, so if you have some neo-Nazi group that starts wanting to wave around the rainbow flag for the LGBTQ community, are you going to then turn around and label all them as neo-Nazis and racists because that's their symbol that they've adopted, that's been around for long before anybody else adopted it for a hate symbol?
They wave the American flag too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And even in Maryland, on our license plate, we have the thin blue line. You can order that as a special license plate.
Huh.
So
yeah.
I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous, the comments they were getting. I mean, people just don't do their research and they don't know their history. And it's just easier to get their information off of Wikipedia, because if you go to Wikipedia, that's what it says for the thin blue line flag, is it was, used as in Charlottesville, and this and that has been used by neo-Nazi groups. And that's where people get their information. But that's not where it came from. It was born post 9/11. So it's been around way before Black Lives Matter, way before Charlottesville. But because a certain minority group chose to wave that during that incident, now it's become associated with that. And people associate that with, Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. And it's being divisive.
Right. Yeah. So much to unpack there. So first of all, Wikipedia is something that anybody can update. You get an idea, you can update yourself.
Right.
Right. It gets reverted back, but it can be changed by anybody. Okay, so yeah, so to your point, I mean, same thing with the Confederate flag, which I won't talk about here. People don't understand that was never the symbol for the Confederacy. It was a battle flag. The Confederate flag looked more like the flag of North Carolina. Actually, it was like and so when you associate stuff like that, it's almost, you're conflating things to create a straw man, more or less, right? So if because when with Donald Trump, right? David Duke, right? They'll say, well, Trump was endorsed by the KKK, right? Well, they also supported Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, a major KKK or Ku Klux Klan organization supported Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that Hillary Clinton is part of KKK? No. Does it mean that Trump's part of KKK? No, because you can't control those constituencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, I think what happens is, like you said, number one, people don't do their research, and they're looking for something that basically agrees with what they already feel. And so if there's something like Wikipedia is out there, which is already inaccurate, or Snopes, which is already, shaky at best, then they use that to build their argument, create this straw man, and then just try and say, hey, and then go off on that, and just have the louder voice of it, and then that way they feel they can get their stuff accomplished. And so that's essentially what's happening is the small minority with a louder voice, based on bad information, is driving the narrative, which is driving the issue, which is causing the people who actually are rational to back off, because we're like, hey, seriously, it's not that big a deal, and we'll back off just thinking, what's the point when we should be fighting back?
Yeah.
So I just think, all that stuff is really, really manipulative. And I think we need to just fight back on some of this stuff.
Well, the other thing that's unique about this picture that you have up on the screen here, you probably can't see it unless you zoom in, but we had to address this in the Twitter comments. So the dad owns his own woodworking shop, okay, and he has adopted a symbol for his woodworking company that it has two crossed hammers with a circular saw in the background, okay, and that's what he uses for his woodworking logo. And it's hard to tell in the picture, but he actually has that logo tattooed on his forearm, okay.
I'm gonna try and find it. Hold on.
Yeah.
When I zoom in, it doesn't like it. Hold on. Are we here?
Yeah. So if you can, it's hard to tell in the photo, but
yeah, right here. Yeah. You can't see the mouse though. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah, you can't see that.
Yeah. So he adopted that as his company logo, and his company's been around since 2014. So people were looking at that photo. And so there's some other hate group called like the Hammersmiths or something. And this was all brought to our attention through Twitter because of this incident. And they were like, why does he have the Hammersmiths logo tattooed on his forearm? This guy is clearly a racist. So we had to do our research, and we looked up the Hammersmiths logo. And the Hammersmiths logo apparently is two sickles crossed with some other circular thing in the background. So I was like, really, this guy has a woodworking business, and he has two crossed hammers with a circular saw, and now you're conflicting with some other, racist hate group that has, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then people were on there on Twitter saying, why would he tattoo that on his forearm? And it's like, you people don't have the right to tell other people what they can do to their own bodies. If he wants to tattoo his business logo on his forearm as a means of branding and advertising for his business, he has that every right.
Right.
It's just the comments and the leaps that people were making on this, about it being so racist, and it was just unbelievable.
Yeah, the level of, I don't know. Some of it, it's one thing if it's just ignorance, but I think a lot of this is just deliberate. I think it's just they're looking for something, and if you really want to be offended by something, you can be offended by it.
And here's the irony of it all. So I told you earlier that the dad and the son made a thin blue line and a thin red line. So on the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue social media page, there's almost the exact same pictures with the kid and the dad in front of a fire station, in front of a fire engine, handing the flag with the red line to the fireman. Everybody loved that. Nobody had a problem with that. That got to stay in the station. But it's because it's the thin blue line that everybody had a problem with.
And so here's the thing, if they had the argument, okay, you're disgracing the flag, then you would have a valid argument. But even with that, disgracing the flag is not this valued argument, because it's not the American flag. It's not red, white, and blue. It's got a blue line in it. It's a distinct, different flag. And so it may be similar, but there are many flags out there that are approved that are similar to the American flag. They're not the American flag. The flag for Guilford County, for the that General Nathaniel Greene used to fight with his army in 1785, whenever it was. Or, I'm sorry, 1786. No, I'm saying 1776. Anyway, that flag is very similar to the American flag, but it's not the American flag. It's a Guilford flag.
But here's the thing about that, though. If you actually go look in that U.S. statute regarding the flag, the U.S. Supreme Court actually decriminalized improperly using the flag or displaying the flag or making alterations to the flag or whatever. They decriminalized that back in the 60s, and that statute actually only applied in the District of Columbia.
Say that again. So it's only.
Yeah. So if you read the wording of that statute about misusing the flag or whatever, putting your own markings on the flag or changing the flag in any way, the wording of the statute in U.S. Code actually only applied in the District of Columbia.
Oh, okay.
And the Supreme Court decriminalized that offense in the 60s.
Okay.
That was another argument people were making, is like, well, they're in violation of of changing the American flag. Well, again, we started looking into this, and if you read the wording, that statute only applied within the border of the District of Columbia, and the Supreme Court decriminalized that in the 60s.
Well, there are many American flag variations, like you mentioned. Different groups have a variation, different colors of the variation, and that's never been a problem. So, even if they were to use that, at least they're starting with an intelligence, framework. You can just shoot it down through just basic logic and hypocrisy with other variations that aren't being touched. Like you said, the thin red flag, no problem, right? So obviously, it's something about that blue line that's the issue, and of course, that goes back to the law enforcement. It goes back to ICE. It goes back to all this stuff, and it just seems like this one faction that just doesn't want to deal with law enforcement, and they want to create a narrative that law enforcement is not on our side. They're not here to serve and protect. And once you start doing that, you're breaking down the foundations of our society.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just the adversarial nature of the job that, that creates this. And, and this has always been a symbol of, the sacrifice that officers have made over the years, that have died because of this job. And it's how we remember and how we honor them. And that's how it is for us. It has nothing to do with, like Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter or anything like that. It's just a way for us to remember, our fellow brothers and sisters who've given everything, a sacrifice, for this country.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit about the Black Lives Matter and the Blue Lives Matter, because people think that those things are mutually exclusive. No, they're mutually exclusive, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're totally two separate different things. You can be pro-police and pro-Black people, right? just because you're pro-police doesn't mean you're anti-Black, or just because you're anti-Black doesn't mean you're pro-Black. Right. I mean, pro-police, whatever. So, and so I had an argument with somebody who they were saying that, because I was supporting the cops, because I was supporting the police, I was anti-Black Lives Matter. I said, no, I'm anti-Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter isn't consistent across the board. If it's truly Black Lives Matter, it should be Black Lives Matter for all Blacks, right? Mm-hmm. And so not just Black Lives Matter for the 0.000000001% of Black men who are killed who are not carrying weapons, right? You're basically have a greater chance of getting hit by lightning to be a Black man and be unarmed, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and get shot by a police officer. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. And so until you're consistent across the board, I don't want to hear it. And so I told him, I said, look, you're advocating your what word did I use? Well, your negativity is leading to an atmosphere in which law enforcement officers' lives are going to be at stake, and be in danger. And soon after that, there was a killing in Dallas, and with some law enforcement officers who were killed, and mm-hmm. they believe it was because of a racial or anti-police. I don't remember the story exactly, but they believe it was related to that particular sentiment towards negativity to police officers. Mm-hmm. And so, just want to say in this video that it's a clear distinction between Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. They are both are separate, and they can both exist together, and they both should exist together. Personally, I think Black Lives Matter is nothing more than a left-wing tactic for Democrats to basically say the whites are racist, and just to use that as cover, to use their rhetoric to spew evil crap, where Blue Lives Matter is nothing more than a defense mechanism, or a defense posture, a recognition posture, and a posture of saying, hey, we honor our police officers because they're the ones, like you said before, they are in between the line of what would you call it? In between the line of freedom and
like chaos and order.
Chaos and order. So yeah.
And the other thing, Black Lives Matter was born post Ferguson, and that whole narrative in Ferguson, the whole hands up, don't shoot, turned out to be a false narrative.
Exactly.
And that's what it was born out of. And the Blue Lives Matter was born out of just frustration of cops constantly being attacked by the media, constantly being attacked by their politicians, constantly being under siege by citizens and the media and everybody, that they just got fed up with it. And, they were like, hey, you know what? We're people too. We're out here. We wear a uniform. We're out here to serve and protect you. How about a little support? And that's all it was born out of.
Yeah, the Attorney General under Obama, I forget his name right now, had admitted that it was a false narrative. Mm-hmm. That hands up, don't shoot was false. And he had to say that because the physical evidence proved it. If you look at the eyewitness testimony, the physical evidence, it was impossible for that narrative to be true. And so he had to admit it. Okay, yeah. So it didn't really, but he said it, but then it didn't stop it from continuing on forward. And like you said, then of course you had the other narrative come out there. Same thing with Jesse Smollett, and I dare I say Trayvon Martin. I did a review. I'll leave a link above on the Trayvon Martin hoax, which is really fascinating. That movie is incredible. Check it out. And basically, a long story short, he basically proves that the witness on the stand, the female who's supposed to be the girlfriend of Trayvon Martin, was not the person on the phone. He actually interviewed the actual person and proved that person on the stand was not the right person, and that the whole thing was a cover up. And so that whole false narrative led to even more bad stuff to happen. So Trayvon Martin, hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe, all that stuff. And I'm not trying to speak to the specificity of any of that stuff, but the fact is, it brewed an atmosphere and an attitude of anti-police, and it needs to be stopped. It needs to be countered by every law-abiding, peace-loving, freedom-loving person in this country.
Yeah, and I don't want your viewers to think that I'm anti-Black Lives Matter, because I'm not. Again, it's not mutually exclusive. But if you're going to call yourself a group as Black Lives Matter, then be out in Chicago to try and stop the gun violence for all the people that are being shot and killed in Chicago. That's where they should be focusing their effort, not on the minuscule number of African Americans who are shot and killed by the police. Which, if you go look at the crime stats, the numbers are minuscule compared to all the other Black lives that are lost through other means. So if that's what your goal is, then that's where you should be focusing your attention.
I'm thinking of this right now. There's a guy, Hawk Nelson. He is the one of the national leaders for the Black Lives Matter. He did a show on PragerU with Candace Owens show. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna leave a link to that right above, where basically he talks about. It's a really good interview where he's the leader of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think in New York or wherever it is. He's one of the largest chapters, and he has like an hour and a half discussion with her, and it's just fascinating. And how they actually have common ground, where Candace Owens is saying, "Look, your Black Lives Matter movement pretty much sucks because you're not consistent," and he throws it back at her, and it's like, "Well, this is our take on it." And there was actually common ground. And at the end of it, he actually came her way. She didn't really go his way at all, but I think they had an understanding. And I think if you really want to understand Black Lives Matter, you should watch that interview with Candace Owens and this guy Hawk. I think it's Hawk Nelson, I believe. And yeah, because he had some situation where he was in the past where he was actually protesting and had gotten beat down, and he has perspective that she didn't have, and so you can kind of see his attitude towards it. And he even acknowledged a little bit that, hey, we could be doing more, and so I guess BLM is not monolithic across the way they think, nor is Blue Lives Matter across the board, because there may be some who support Blue Lives Matter who really are anti-Black Lives Matter, but it's not because of that. It's just because it is what it is. But fundamentally, Blue Lives, Black Lives are cohesive movements to make this country better. One's reactive and one's built out of false narratives.
Yeah.
So, and hypocrisy. So, anyway, it's kind of heavy stuff, dude, we're talking about tonight, but I think it's important. So, yeah. So, what time is it? The game still going on?
Probably just started.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. I'm gonna end this right now. Is there anything you want to say or you want to do?
No, I think it was a good discussion. Glad we had it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, awesome. So, if you guys like this discussion, we're gonna do more of this. I have an idea for a new show that I'm not gonna talk about right now, but hopefully in the next few weeks you'll see something come through where we do some of this more often, and make it a little bit more formalized, a little less off the cuff. But I think sometimes talking like this, unscripted, kind of brings out a different kind of element that you don't really get when you have things that are just totally laid out and outlined. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. And if you like this content on this channel, please click a like and subscribe, and check out some videos that I have right here.